The morning sun was bright and the city was busy as always. People rushed to work, cars honked, and everyone seemed in a hurry. But one small boy, around 12 years old, walked slowly on the sidewalk, holding a brown envelope tightly in his hands. His name was Jason. Jason was a quiet boy. His mother had asked him to go to the bank and deposit some money. It wasn't much, but it was her savings, money she worked very hard for. She trusted Jason because he was responsible and honest. He walked into the Grand City Bank, a tall glass building with big golden letters that said bank on the front. Inside, everything looked shiny. The marble floor, the lights, even the smell was different, clean and rich. Jason looked around nervously. He had never been in such a big bank before. People in suits walked fast, talking on phones. Some looked at him curiously. A young boy in simple clothes holding an old envelope. He joined the line, waiting for his turn. He tried to stay calm. He remembered his mother's words that morning. Just be polite, Jason. Give them the envelope and say it's for deposit. As he waited, his small hands started to sweat. The people in line whispered. A woman behind him frowned and said, "Is he lost?" At the counter stood Ms. Miller, the bank manager. She was a tall woman with short blonde hair, wearing a dark blue suit. She was strict and serious, known for not smiling much. She noticed Jason standing in line and frowned. She whispered to her assistant, "What is that boy doing here alone?" The assistant shrugged. Maybe he's with someone. But Jason wasn't. He stepped forward when his turn came and smiled nervously. "Good morning, ma'am. I want to deposit this money in my mother's account," he said politely. Ms. Miller looked at him sharply. "Your mother's account?" she asked. "Yes, ma'am," Jason said softly, showing the envelope. She crossed her arms. "And where is your mother?" "She's at work, ma'am. She told me to come here." Ms. Miller sighed, clearly not believing him. "Do you even have an account number?" Jason nodded and carefully took out a small paper from his pocket. It had the account details written on it in his mother's handwriting. He handed it to her with both hands. Ms. Miller looked at the paper, then at Jason again. And you expect me to believe you're telling the truth?" Jason blinked. "Yes, ma'am. It's my mom's account." The manager's tone became cold. "This bank handles serious business. Children don't just walk in here with envelopes of money. Are you sure you didn't find this?" Jason shook his head quickly. "No, ma'am." "My mom gave it to me. She works—" "Enough," she interrupted. She glanced around at the other customers watching. "We can't allow random children to make fake deposits." Jason's face turned red. "I'm not lying," he whispered. Ms. Miller looked toward the security guard. "Please check what's in that envelope." Jason held it tighter, scared. "No, please. It's my mom's money." The guard looked uncomfortable. "Ma'am, he's just a kid." But Ms. Miller's voice was firm. "Rules are rules. Open it." The guard slowly took the envelope and looked inside. It was full of $100 bills and a check. Everyone around gasped softly. Ms. Miller's eyes widened for a second, but then she narrowed them. "So much cash? Where did you get this?" Jason's voice trembled. "It's from my mom's company. She asked me to—" "Enough!" Ms. Miller raised her hand. "I think I've heard enough lies for one day." She walked to her desk and picked up the phone. "Security, come to the front. We have a situation." Jason's eyes filled with tears. "Please, I'm telling the truth." People in the bank started whispering. Some pulled out their phones to record. Others just stared. The atmosphere grew heavy. The security officers came quickly. Ms. Miller pointed at Jason and said, "He's trying to deposit stolen money. Call the police." Jason's heart raced. "No, it's my mom's. Please call her. She'll tell you." But no one listened. The officers gently took his arm. He tried not to cry, but his voice broke. "Please, I didn't do anything wrong." One of the officers looked at Ms. Miller and said quietly, "Ma'am, he's just a kid." Ms. Miller replied coldly, "Thieves come in all sizes." Jason looked down, his tears falling on the shiny floor. Everyone around watched, but no one helped. The police were called. Within minutes, 2 officers entered the bank. Ms. Miller walked to them and said confidently, "That's the boy. He came in with a suspicious envelope full of cash." Jason tried to explain, but his voice was too soft. One officer knelt down to his level and asked gently, "What's your name, son?" "Jason," he whispered. "Who gave you the money?" "My mom. She told me to deposit it." The officer looked at the envelope, then back at the manager. What's inside? Money and a check, Ms. Miller said quickly. Probably stolen. The officer sighed. Let's take a look. He opened the envelope, slowly pulling out the check. His eyes moved across the writing. Something caught his attention. He looked at the name signed at the bottom, and his eyes widened slightly. He turned to Ms. Miller and said quietly, "Ma'am, you might want to see this." Camera zooms in on the check. The name on it reads, Emma Johnson, CEO, Future Tech Industries. The officer looks shocked. Ms. Miller frowns in confusion. Jason whispers, "That's my mom." The officer looks at him, realizing the mistake that may have just been made. The police officer stared at the check in silence. The bank went quiet. Everyone was watching. The name on the check was clear. Emma Johnson, CEO, Future Tech Industries. The officer looked up at the bank manager, Ms. Miller, whose face showed confusion mixed with disbelief. Jason stood there with tears still on his face, clutching the edge of his sleeve nervously. The officer spoke softly. "Ma'am, this check belongs to a company CEO. Are you sure this boy was doing something wrong?" Ms. Miller folded her arms tightly and said, "Of course. He must have found it or stolen it. Do you really think a child like him could be connected to a company like that?" Jason whispered. "It's my mom's company." The officer turned to him. "Your mom works for this company?" Jason shook his head slowly. "No, sir. She owns it." The people standing around began murmuring. Some of them frowned at Ms. Miller, but the manager only laughed, a sharp, cold laugh. "Enough of this nonsense," she said. "He's lying. Do you know how many people try to trick banks? I've seen this before. Fake checks, fake names." Jason's lip trembled. "It's not fake. Please just call her." Ms. Miller turned to the officer. "Take him to the station. We'll find out the truth there." The officer hesitated. He looked at the check again. Everything looked real. The logo, the signature, the bank details. Still, he had to follow procedure. He knelt down in front of Jason and said kindly, "Son, we're just going to ask your mom a few questions, okay?" Jason nodded slowly, his eyes full of fear. The officer asked, "Do you know her number?" Jason quickly said, "Yes, sir," and began to tell the number. Before he could finish, Ms. Miller interrupted loudly. "No need to waste time on this. Call the company yourself. I'm sure they'll deny knowing him." Her tone was full of arrogance, her eyes full of disbelief. The officer sighed and pulled out his phone. He dialed the number written on the check. Everyone in the bank went quiet again. The phone rang once, twice, 3 times. Then a calm, confident voice answered. "This is Emma Johnson speaking." The officer straightened his back. "Ma'am, this is Officer Blake from Grand City Bank. We have your son here." Before he could finish, her voice became sharp. "My what? My son? What happened to Jason?" The officer quickly explained. "Ma'am, your son came to deposit a check and the bank manager, Emma, cut him off." "Put the manager on the phone. Right now." The officer looked at Ms. Miller and handed her the phone. She took it slowly, pretending to stay confident. "Hello, this is Ms. Miller, the manager," she said. "We had a young boy, but she didn't get to finish either." Emma's voice on the phone was calm but full of power. "That boy is my son. You called the police on him?" Ms. Miller froze. I was only following protocol, ma'am." He looked suspicious. Emma's tone became colder. "Suspicious? Because he's a child? Or because of the way he looks?" The bank fell silent. Even the customers could hear part of the conversation. Ms. Miller's confidence began to fade. No, it's not like that. I was only trying to—" Emma interrupted again. "I'm on my way. Do not move my son. And don't you dare treat him like a criminal." The call ended. The manager stood there, her face pale. The officer looked at her and said quietly, "She's coming here." Jason looked up hopefully. "My mom is coming?" The officer nodded gently. "Yes, son. She's on her way." Ms. Miller stepped back and tried to act calm. "Everyone, please carry on with your business," she said nervously. But no one moved. The customers kept whispering. Jason sat down on a chair near the front desk. The officer stayed beside him. The guard brought him a glass of water. "Thank you," Jason said softly. Time felt slow. 10 minutes passed, then 15. Outside the bank, a black car stopped. The door opened slowly. A tall woman in a black business suit stepped out. Her walk was confident, her eyes sharp. Everyone could feel her presence before she even entered the bank. Ms. Miller adjusted her jacket nervously. The glass doors opened, and Emma Johnson, the CEO herself, walked in. The security guard straightened. The officer quickly stood up. Emma's eyes went straight to Jason. She hurried toward him, knelt down, and hugged him tightly. "Are you okay, baby?" Jason nodded, tears in his eyes. "I told them, Mom, I told them it was your money." Emma stood up and turned toward the manager. Her face was calm, but her voice carried anger. "You called the police on my son?" Ms. Miller stammered. "Ma'am, I didn't realize who he was." Emma stepped closer. "That's exactly the problem. You didn't have to know who he was. You just had to listen. But instead you judged him." Everyone in the bank went silent again. Emma turned to the officers. "Thank you for staying professional. I'll take it from here." The police nodded respectfully. Emma then faced Ms. Miller again. "Show me your security cameras. I want to see exactly what happened." Ms. Miller swallowed hard. "Yes, ma'am." She led Emma toward her office, trembling. The officer stayed with Jason, giving him a kind smile. "Your mom is impressive," he whispered. Jason smiled weakly. "Yeah, she always is." The camera followed Emma and Ms. Miller into the office. Emma stood behind the manager's desk, arms crossed, watching the screen as the footage played, every moment, every word. The truth was about to be revealed. Emma stood still, her arms crossed, eyes fixed on the large screen in the manager's office. Ms. Miller's hands trembled slightly as she clicked the mouse to play the footage. The room was silent except for the soft hum of the computer. The video showed everything. Jason entering the bank quietly. Jason standing in line patiently. Jason smiling politely when it was his turn. Then came the moment that made Emma's heart tighten. The moment when Ms. Miller accused him. Emma watched her son's small, scared face on the screen. He wasn't angry. He wasn't rude. He was just frightened. Ms. Miller kept glancing nervously at Emma, who hadn't spoken yet. When the video ended, Emma slowly turned toward her. Her voice was calm, but her words were like ice. "So, this is what you call protocol?" Ms. Miller swallowed hard. "Ma'am, I didn't mean to. I was only doing my job." Emma raised an eyebrow. "Your job? Your job is to serve customers, not humiliate them. You didn't see a customer. You saw a target." Ms. Miller's voice cracked. I thought he was suspicious." "I didn't know he was your son." Emma stepped closer. "You didn't have to know he was my son to treat him with respect." Ms. Miller looked down, speechless. Emma took a deep breath, trying to stay calm. Her voice softened but still carried power. "Do you have any idea how scared he was? A child, standing alone while adults accused him of stealing." Tears welled up in Ms. Miller's eyes. "I made a mistake." Emma nodded slowly. "Yes, you did. And mistakes have consequences." Outside the office, the bank employees were whispering. Customers were still gathered, waiting to see what would happen. The security guard peeked inside the office but quickly looked away when Emma's eyes met his. Emma turned back to Ms. Miller. "You will apologize to my son. Not because he's my child, not because I'm a CEO, but because you treated him unfairly." Ms. Miller wiped her eyes. "I will, I promise." Emma nodded once. "Good. Then do it now." They walked back into the main lobby. The sound of footsteps echoed on the shiny floor. Everyone turned to look. Jason was sitting on a chair near the counter, holding the empty envelope in his hands. The officer stood beside him. When Emma approached, Jason stood up quickly. "Mom?" She smiled softly and touched his cheek. "It's okay, Jason. Everything's fine now." Then she turned to Ms. Miller, her expression turning serious again. Ms. Miller took a deep breath, her voice shaking. "Jason, I'm sorry for what I did. I shouldn't have judged you. I was wrong." Jason looked at her quietly. His eyes were innocent, but his face showed pain. He whispered, "You thought I was bad, but I just wanted to help my mom." Ms. Miller's eyes filled with tears. "I know. I'm truly sorry." Emma placed her hand on Jason's shoulder. "Forgiveness doesn't erase what happened, but it can start something better." Jason nodded slowly. "It's okay, ma'am." The crowd around them began to clap softly. Some smiled. Others looked embarrassed, realizing how quickly they had judged too. The officer cleared his throat. "Ma'am, everything's settled here. We'll be leaving now. Emma thanked him politely. "Thank you for your understanding, officer." As the police left, Emma turned back to Ms. Miller. "I'm not here for revenge, but this can't be ignored. My son deserves justice." Ms. Miller nodded weakly. "I understand." Emma pulled out a small card from her purse and handed it to her. "My office address. I'll be expecting a full written apology, and I will also speak to your bank director about this incident." Ms. Miller's hands shook as she took the card. "Yes, ma'am." Emma held Jason's hand and started walking toward the door. Everyone in the bank moved aside to give them space. As they reached the entrance, a voice called from behind. "Ms. Johnson." It was one of the tellers, a young woman who had seen everything. She said softly, "I'm sorry too. I didn't stop it. I should have spoken up." Emma turned and gave her a small, kind smile. "The next time you see something wrong, speak. That's how change begins." Jason looked up at his mother proudly. She always knew the right thing to say. They walked out into the sunlight. The bright day felt different now, calmer, stronger. Inside the bank, Ms. Miller stood frozen. She looked around the room and saw the faces of her staff. None of them looked at her the same way anymore. Her assistant whispered, "What will you do?" Ms. Miller stared at the glass doors where Emma and Jason had just left. "I don't know," she said softly, "but I'll never forget this day." That night, the news spread across the city. A short video taken by one of the customers went viral online. The headline read, "Bank manager calls police on boy, shocked when his mother arrives." Comments poured in from people everywhere, some angry, some supportive, some simply heartbroken by what they saw. Meanwhile, at home, Jason sat on the couch beside his mom. He looked up and said, "Mom, will that lady lose her job?" Emma sighed softly. "Maybe, but what matters more is that she learns." Jason nodded slowly. "You think she will?" Emma smiled faintly. "Everyone deserves a chance to change. Even her." The camera slowly zoomed out as they sat together. The light from the window fell softly on their faces, a symbol of calm after a storm. But deep inside Emma's eyes, there was still something burning. Determination. She wasn't done yet. The next day, she planned to return to the bank, not as a customer, but as someone who would demand real justice. The next morning, the sky was cloudy. A light rain fell across the city, washing the streets clean. Inside her home, Emma Johnson sat quietly at the dining table reading the morning news on her tablet. Every major news channel was talking about the same story. Bank manager calls police on young boy and faces backlash. The photo of Ms. Miller's face was on every screen. Jason came out of his room, rubbing his eyes. "Mom, everyone's talking about us online," he said softly. Emma looked up and smiled gently. "I know, sweetheart. But don't worry. You did nothing wrong." Jason sat beside her. "Are you going back to the bank today?" Emma nodded slowly. "Yes, some things can't be fixed by words alone. People need to learn from their mistakes." Jason looked a little nervous. "Will the lady be angry?" Emma smiled faintly. "Maybe, but sometimes the truth hurts before it heals." At the Grand City Bank, things were different that morning. The usual crowd was smaller. Some employees whispered nervously. Others kept glancing at the door, waiting. Inside her office, Ms. Miller sat at her desk, pale and exhausted. She hadn't slept the whole night. The video had gone viral, and angry comments flooded the bank's social media pages. Her boss had called early in the morning. "Do you realize what you've done? Our reputation is in danger." Now she sat alone, staring at the empty coffee cup in front of her. Every sound from outside made her flinch. She knew Emma would come. At exactly 10 a.m., the glass doors opened. Emma walked in, calm, confident, dressed in a gray suit. Jason walked beside her, holding her hand. People turned to look immediately. Some whispered, "That's her, the CEO." Emma walked straight to the front counter. "I'm here to see the bank director," she said firmly. The receptionist nodded nervously and made a quick call. "Yes, ma'am, please wait. He'll be right with you." A tall man in a dark suit appeared moments later. Mr. Cooper, the bank's regional director. He walked toward Emma, extending his hand. "Miss Johnson, I'm so sorry about what happened yesterday. Please come to my office." Emma nodded politely but said, "I'd like Ms. Miller to be present as well." Mr. Cooper hesitated for a second, then said quietly, "Of course." He signaled to a staff member. who went to call Ms. Miller. When Ms. Miller walked in, her eyes were red and tired. She avoided looking at Jason. Emma stood tall. "Let's talk," she said. Inside the director's office, the air was heavy. Cooper sat behind his desk, Ms. Miller on one side, Emma and Jason on the other. Emma began, her voice calm but firm. "Yesterday, your employee called the police on my son, a 12-year-old boy, because she decided he looked suspicious. She didn't ask questions. She didn't listen. She judged." Mr. Cooper looked embarrassed. "Ms. Johnson, we're deeply sorry." "This was unacceptable," Emma nodded. "An apology isn't enough. The problem isn't just one person. It's the way people think. I want this bank to train its staff, to teach them about respect and fairness." Mr. Cooper listened carefully. "You're absolutely right. We'll start a full investigation and include a new training program." Emma continued, her tone softer now. "I don't want to ruin anyone's life, but I want to make sure no child, no person is ever treated the way my son was." Ms. Miller finally spoke. Her voice was low and shaky. "Ms. Johnson, I can't say anything to erase what I did, but I've thought about it all night. I realized how wrong I was." She looked at Jason, her eyes full of regret. "I saw a young boy and assumed the worst. You reminded me that I lost my kindness somewhere along the way. I'm truly sorry." Jason looked at her quietly. Then he said in his gentle voice, "It's okay, ma'am. Everyone can change." Emma smiled softly at her son's words. Even the director looked touched. Mr. Cooper said, "Ms. Miller will be suspended for now while we review the case. But we'll make sure something good comes from this." Emma nodded. "That's all I ask." She stood up, ready to leave, but then turned back to Ms. Miller. "I believe people deserve second chances, but only if they use them to do good." Ms. Miller nodded quickly. "I will, I promise." Emma and Jason walked out of the office together. Outside, the employees stood quietly watching them pass. Some smiled. Some even clapped softly as a sign of respect. When they reached the car, Jason looked up at his mom. "Mom, are you still mad at her?" he asked softly. Emma sighed. "No, Jason, anger doesn't fix anything, but I'm not going to forget either." "Change takes time," Jason smiled. "You're the best mom ever." Emma chuckled softly and kissed his forehead. "And you're the bravest son." They got into the car and drove away, leaving the bank behind. Inside the building, Ms. Miller stood near the window, watching them go. Her heart felt heavy, not with anger, but with guilt and realization. She whispered to herself, "I will make things right. I'll find a way to do better." That evening, Emma sat in her office at Future Tech Industries, looking out at the sunset through the glass walls. Her assistant entered and said, "Ma'am, news channels are asking for an interview. They want you to talk about what happened." Emma thought for a moment, then said calmly, "Yes, I'll speak. But not to shame anyone, to teach people that respect should never depend on who someone is." Her assistant smiled. "That's a beautiful message, ma'am." Emma turned her chair toward the window, her reflection merging with the fading sunlight. Her voice was soft but strong. Sometimes a painful story can open people's eyes. And maybe this one will. The next morning, the city was quiet but full of whispers. Every news channel, social media page, and radio station talked about one story: the bank incident. The video had spread everywhere. Inside her office at Future Tech Industries, Emma Johnson sat across from a camera crew. The interviewer, a kind-faced woman named Clara, adjusted her mic and said, "Ms. Johnson, thank you for speaking with us. The world has seen what happened at the bank. What message would you like to share?" Emma smiled softly. "I don't want anger," she began. "I want understanding. My son Jason was judged because of his appearance. That should never happen to anyone," she continued, her voice calm but powerful. "People must learn to look with their hearts, not their eyes. A kind word can change a life. A harsh one can destroy it." Clara nodded, moved by her words. "And what about the manager, Ms. Miller? What do you think should happen to her?" Emma took a deep breath. "She made a mistake, a serious one. But I believe in giving people second chances, because change begins with forgiveness." The interview ended with soft piano music. The video was uploaded that afternoon. Within hours, millions of people watched it. Comments poured in. "Such a graceful woman. Her message made me cry. We need more people like her." But not everyone was smiling that day. Inside her small apartment, Ms. Miller sat alone at her kitchen table. Her eyes were tired, her phone filled with hundreds of notifications, most of them angry. People had found her name and posted harsh comments online. She scrolled for a moment, then put the phone down and covered her face. Tears fell silently onto her hands. She whispered to herself, "I never meant to hurt anyone. I just didn't think." The memories replayed in her head: Jason's frightened face, Emma's disappointed eyes, the silence of the bank. Every second haunted her. Her doorbell rang. She quickly wiped her tears and opened the door. It was her neighbor, Mrs. Green, an old lady who lived next door. She smiled kindly and held a small bowl of soup. "I saw the news," Mrs. Green said softly. "Are you okay, dear?" Ms. Miller's eyes filled again. "I'm fine. I just wish I could take it all back." Mrs. Green placed the bowl on the table and said, "You can't change the past, but you can decide what you'll do next." Her words stayed in Ms. Miller's heart. That night, Ms. Miller couldn't sleep. She kept thinking about Emma's words from the interview. Change begins with forgiveness. She decided something. Tomorrow she would visit Future Tech Industries and apologize again, not because she was told to, but because she truly wanted to make things right. The next morning, Ms. Miller dressed in a simple outfit. No fancy suit, no makeup, just honesty. She took the subway and walked through the tall glass doors of Future Tech. The receptionist looked up, surprised. "Do you have an appointment?" "No," Ms. Miller said quietly. "But please, tell Ms. Johnson that Ms. Miller from Grand City Bank is here." The receptionist made a quick call. After a short pause, she said, "She'll see you." Ms. Miller took a deep breath and followed her inside. When the office door opened, Emma stood up from behind her desk. Jason was sitting on the couch reading a book. When he saw Ms. Miller, his eyes widened a little, but he didn't look afraid. "Good morning," Emma said calmly. "I didn't expect to see you again." Ms. Miller lowered her head. "I came to thank you, and to apologize again. I watched your interview. You didn't insult me or try to ruin me. You spoke with grace. That taught me more than any punishment could." Emma nodded slowly. "I'm glad you understood." Ms. Miller looked at Jason. "I'm truly sorry, Jason, I hurt you. I made you feel small, and that's something I'll regret forever." Jason gave a shy smile. "It's okay. My mom says everyone deserves a second chance." Emma smiled proudly at her son. Ms. Miller continued, "I've been suspended from my job, but I want to use this time to change myself. If there's anything I can do to help others, to make up for my mistake, please tell me." Emma thought for a moment, then said, "You can start by helping where it truly matters, helping children who face the same kind of judgment. I run a charity called Bright Hearts Foundation. We help underprivileged kids get education and confidence. Come work with us." Ms. Miller's eyes widened. You'd really give me that chance?" Emma smiled gently. "Yes, because I believe that forgiveness means more when it opens a door, not closes one." Tears filled Ms. Miller's eyes again. "Thank you, Ms. Johnson, I won't waste it." Jason stood and said, "See, Mom? I told you she'd change." Everyone laughed softly, the kind of laughter that comes after a storm. Later that evening, as Ms. Miller left the building, the sun was setting again. She looked up at the golden sky and whispered to herself, "A second chance. I won't let it go." She smiled for the first time in days, a real smile. Meanwhile, inside her office, Emma watched her walk away through the glass window. Jason came up beside her and said, "Do you think she'll do good now?" Emma put her arm around him and said softly, "I think she will." Sometimes one moment of regret can create a lifetime of change. The camera slowly zoomed out, the city glowing in evening light. A soft breeze passing through the trees. A quiet voiceover narrator ended the scene. Regret can break you or it can rebuild you. The choice is yours. The next morning, Ms. Miller stood outside the tall building of the Bright Hearts Foundation. The glass doors shimmered in the sunlight, and a banner near the entrance read, "Helping Hearts, Changing Lives." She took a deep breath and stepped inside. The receptionist greeted her with a warm smile. "Good morning. You must be Ms. Miller." Ms. Miller nodded nervously. "Yes, it's my first day here." "Welcome," the receptionist said cheerfully. "Ms. Johnson is expecting you." She followed the hallway lined with children's drawings, colorful pictures of smiling faces, rainbows, and open hands. For the first time in many days, Ms. Miller felt something inside her. Hope. When she entered the office, Emma Johnson was already there, reviewing some documents. She looked up and smiled. "Good morning, Ms. Miller. Ready to begin?" Ms. Miller nodded. "More than ready. I want to make a difference." Emma handed her a folder. "You'll be helping organize our weekend event, a scholarship drive for children from low-income families. We're expecting many visitors, and your banking experience will be useful." Ms. Miller smiled faintly. "I'll do my best, ma'am." Emma looked at her kindly. "I believe you will." Over the next few days, Ms. Miller worked tirelessly. She helped set up booths, organize donation forms, and prepare financial records. The children at the foundation quickly grew fond of her, especially little Maya, a bright 8-year-old girl who always carried a small notebook and loved to draw. One afternoon, Maya walked up to Ms. Miller with her sketchbook. "Miss Miller," she said shyly, "I drew something for you." Ms. Miller smiled and opened the page. It showed a picture of a woman helping a child across a bridge with a sign that said, "Second chances." Her eyes softened. "This is beautiful, Maya." Maya grinned. "Mom says everyone can start over if they really want to." Ms. Miller's heart tightened. Those words reminded her of Emma and Jason. She gently touched Maya's head. "Your mom is very wise." By the weekend, the big event day arrived. The foundation hall was decorated with bright lights and colorful banners. Families, children, and donors filled the place. Laughter, music, and the sound of hope filled the air. Emma moved around, greeting guests with her usual calm confidence. Jason was there too, helping hand out flyers with a wide smile. Ms. Miller worked quietly at the registration desk, collecting donations and keeping records. She felt proud, useful, and peaceful, feelings she hadn't felt in a long time. Then something unexpected happened. A man in a gray suit approached her table. He looked familiar. He was Mr. Cooper, the regional director from Grand City Bank. "Ms. Miller?" he said in surprise. "I didn't expect to see you here." Ms. Miller stood up nervously. "Hello, sir." He smiled slightly. "I've been following the news. I heard you've been volunteering here." "Yes, sir," she said softly. "Ms. Johnson gave me this chance. I'm trying to make things right." Mr. Cooper looked thoughtful. "I can see that. You look different, calmer, stronger." Ms. Miller smiled faintly. "This place changes people." He nodded. "Well, the bank has also changed. We've started new employee training programs. Just like Ms. Johnson suggested, I came here today to thank her." Ms. Miller looked proud. "She deserves it." Mr. Cooper paused for a moment, then said, "And maybe, when you're ready, there might be a place for you again. Not as a manager, but as a community officer working with our outreach projects." Ms. Miller's eyes widened in surprise. "You mean, I can come back?" He nodded. "If Ms. Johnson agrees." Later that evening, after the event ended, Emma found Ms. Miller sitting outside on the steps, watching the sunset. "You did amazing work today," Emma said, sitting beside her. Ms. Miller smiled softly. "Thank you. I met Mr. Cooper here. He told me about the new training programs. He also offered me a chance to return to the bank. In a new role." Emma looked at her for a long moment, then smiled. "Do you want to go back?" Ms. Miller took a deep breath. "I think so. But not to be who I was before. I want to help others now. I want to teach fairness and kindness." Emma nodded proudly. "That's exactly what redemption means." Ms. Miller looked at her, her eyes full of gratitude. "You changed my life, Ms. Johnson. You didn't punish me. You gave me a reason to be better." Emma smiled gently. "You changed yourself, Ms. Miller. I just gave you a path." They both sat quietly for a moment, watching the orange light fade into the evening sky. Inside the hall, Jason came running out. "Mom, they raised enough money for 30 new scholarships." Emma stood and hugged him. "That's wonderful, sweetheart." Jason turned to Ms. Miller. "Thank you for helping us." Ms. Miller smiled warmly. "No, Jason, thank you. You taught me forgiveness." As the night settled in, the foundation lights glowed softly. Children laughed, volunteers cleaned up, and the world outside seemed just a little brighter. Ms. Miller looked up at the stars and whispered, "Sometimes life gives you a second chance. Not to fix the past, but to build a better future." The camera panned upward, showing the city lights twinkling below, the soft hum of hope filling the air. A week later, Ms. Miller stood in front of the familiar tall building of Grand City Bank. The same glass doors, the same golden letters that once made her feel proud. But today she felt something new. Not pride, purpose. She took a deep breath and walked inside. The security guard at the entrance gave her a polite nod. "Good morning, ma'am. Welcome back." Ms. Miller smiled softly. "Thank you, David. It's good to be back." As she walked through the lobby, memories flashed in her mind. That awful day when she called the police. The fear in Jason's eyes, the shock when Emma revealed who she was. But now everything felt different. The staff looked up as she passed. Some looked surprised, others curious. A few even smiled. She smiled back warmly. Inside the director's office, Mr. Cooper stood waiting. "Ms. Miller," he said with a smile, "welcome to your new position, Community Relations Officer. Your role will be to connect with people, especially those who've lost trust in banks. Teach our team empathy and fairness." Ms. Miller nodded. "Thank you, sir. I won't let you down," Mr. Cooper replied kindly. "You've already proved you're not the same person you were. Let's show everyone what true change looks like." In the following days, Ms. Miller started her new journey. She visited schools, community centers, and local shelters, talking about trust, honesty, and respect. Everywhere she went, people listened. Some remembered her from the viral story, but now they saw someone changed, humble and kind. One afternoon, she stood before a group of young students holding a microphone. She began softly. "Once I made a big mistake. I judged someone before knowing them. That mistake almost ruined my life. But someone gave me a second chance, and that changed everything." The students listened silently. She smiled and continued, "If you ever see someone being treated unfairly, don't stay quiet, stand up. Because doing what's right is what truly makes you strong." The room filled with applause. Ms. Miller smiled, not from pride, but from peace. Meanwhile, at Future Tech Industries, Emma sat in her office reviewing charity reports. Jason entered, holding a flyer. "Mom! Look, Ms. Miller's picture is here. She's giving speeches about kindness." Emma looked at the flyer and smiled. "I knew she would do good," Jason grinned. "Can we go see her sometime?" Emma nodded. "Of course, sweetheart. It's time we see how far she's come." A few days later, Ms. Miller stood on stage at a community event called Hearts United. She spoke about forgiveness and fairness. In the front row, she noticed two familiar faces, Emma and Jason. For a moment, her voice caught. Then she smiled warmly and said, "There are people in this room who taught me the true meaning of kindness. They didn't just forgive me, they helped me find myself again." Emma's eyes softened and Jason waved from the front row. After the event, Ms. Miller walked toward them. "Ms. Johnson, Jason, I didn't know you'd come," Emma smiled. "We wanted to see your new beginning," Jason said cheerfully. "You were awesome up there." Ms. Miller laughed gently. "Thank you, Jason, you've grown so much." Emma placed a hand on Ms. Miller's shoulder. "You've done something beautiful, Ms. Miller. You turned your regret into hope, not just for yourself, but for others too." Ms. Miller's eyes glistened. "I only followed your example." As the three of them stood outside under the golden evening sky, a soft breeze brushed past them. Emma looked at the horizon and said, "Life always gives us two choices, to stay broken or to rise stronger. You chose the second one." Ms. Miller nodded. "And I'll keep choosing it every day." Jason smiled up at them. "You both are like superheroes." They all laughed. The sound filled with warmth and healing. That night, back in her apartment, Ms. Miller opened her drawer and took out Maya's drawing, the one of the woman helping a child across the bridge, labeled Second Chances. She pinned it on her wall and whispered, "Thank you, Maya. Thank you, Emma, for helping me cross my bridge." Her phone buzzed. A message from Emma. "Proud of you. Keep shining, EJ." Ms. Miller smiled, tears glistening in her eyes. She looked out of her window at the city lights and whispered, "This time I'll live with kindness in my heart." The camera panned out slowly, showing the city glowing with hope, soft music rising in the background. A gentle narrator's voice spoke the final words. "A single act of forgiveness can turn an ending into a beginning, and a mistake into a miracle."